Welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. I'd like to thank, first of all, our fantastic sponsors, Hayswood's Accountants and Business Advisors. Let's move on to the panel. If you like the show, please like, share and subscribe. So who have we got today? We've got Dan Ponting, he's the director of Elijah Willow Construction Group, has 42 staff and a turnover of 1.8 million. We've got Lindsey Holland, owner of Cleve Hill Hotel. She's a member and chairperson of Turf Cheltenham. She's also on the Hospitality Events Executive Cheltenham Chamber of Commerce. It was a bit of a mouthful, but I think I got that right. We got David Oldfield, Managing Director of Blue Sky Signage. He's a nice chap and like signage, apparently. That's what I've got written down here. And finally, last but never least, we got Will Abbott. He's a business advisor and partner at Randall and Payne Accountants. They got 70 staff and a turnover of 5 million. If you like the show, please like, share and subscribe. And we're going to share the papers, first of all, courtesy of the BBC. Let's go through the headlines. We've got from the Eye, levelling up plans under threat as HS2 hit by cuts and 2-year delay. The Mirror, huge shambles too. The Times, HS2 will be delayed by another 2 years. The Guardian revealed at least 500 people died after ambulance delays last year. The Daily Telegraph, I'll leave all the headlines, but what's caught my eye in the very bottom corner here is Hunt handed 166 billion war chest for tax cuts. The upcoming budget, says the Telegraph. We've got the Daily Express. Sula Blas, Lineker now. Will the BBC make him say sorry? The Daily Mail also weighs in on the Lineker. Lineker's playing the BBC for fools, they say. Our luck will run out, reckons the Metro. And the Financial Times, well, there's a whole load of different things there. But the story that really struck my eye was actually the Russian oligarchs to offload a big stake in the banks at £2.3 billion. The Daily Star, hypocrisy edited, Prince Charmless. This is obviously Harry, who wants his children to be prince and princesses. You can't blame him, really. Wouldn't we all like to be prince and princesses? And that leads me very nice onto the Prince of Accountants. Hey, Will, thanks for joining Punchline Talks today. So what have you picked out from the news, please?
Good morning, Mark. I'm one of those people that the paper boy didn't manage to get through the snow this morning, so I've been diligently researching the interweb to come up with some stories. I guess the obvious one for me is the UK economy returns to growth in January, 0.3%. Hooray! All the doom and gloom about we're in recession and everything else, which is not something I'm seeing when I'm talking to clients and businesses. They're all saying that they're really busy and wondering, there's lots of uncertainty out there, but actually wondering what happens next. So I think actually it's not huge growth, but at least it's positive, right? So I think that's good, and we need more stories like that and less of the doom and gloom. Related to business, there was an interesting story I picked up about childcare. So full-time nursery cost for an under 2 is now about 15 grand a year. So if you think you've got 2 children under 2, that's costing you 30 grand a year. You might as well not go to work. There is a shortage of workers. I keep saying this. There's plenty of work around. The shortage of workers, and I think issues like this are down to government policy to try and fix. Employers cannot fix childcare problems. It needs government policy and taxation or subsidy or whatever else to try and fix that, because there are people that we need to be making economic contributions that are doing a very, very valuable job staying at home looking after their kids because they can't afford nurseries. So there's bit of a disconnect there. That's 2 stories. The third story that caught my eye was interesting. Lufthansa are vying to become the world's most luxurious airliner. Now, who would have thought of that? We all think about Emirates and people like that, especially if you're Arsenal fans like me. But I read what they were going to do to become the most luxurious airliner, Mark. They're going to have 27-inch monitors, a mini bar, wardrobes, double bed, workspace, extra private space. And I thought, wow, Lufthansa have modelled their first-class luxury rooms on Mark's office. How about that?
It does sound exactly like my office, actually. Thanks very much. Especially the mini bar bit.
I can imagine.
Well, that's a great collection of stories. We're going to go over to Lindsey. What have you picked out for us today, Lindsey?
Good morning. So I'm starting off with Eurovision, not because listening yesterday I thought it was the most phenomenal track ever, but because from a hospitality and tourism point of view, I will be really interested to see how we fare like the Olympics, these are usually a sort of a mass marketing thing and not necessarily great for the economy. And it will be really interesting to see how Liverpool fares. Actually, there's already the rumours about touts for tickets and for accommodation and for all these bits and pieces. So I'm quite keen to follow this story from a financial sort of hospitality point of view.
Who's the group, Lindsay?
Say again, sorry?
Who's the group for the UK?
It's a single. Her name is May Muller. She was born the year we last won.
Well, that should do it, really.
I think she was born in 97. It seems really bonkers. So yes, we haven't had a female act for a while, apparently. So they're hoping that this shines through. But interesting enough, when I was talking to my friends about it yesterday, the one comment we all said was, well, surely we can't afford to have it for another year. So we actually don't want to have a really good act, because if it ends up back here, can we afford as an economy to do it for a second year in a row? So that was my first story.
Okay.
And I was actually, Will's already picked up on it, but I was going to talk about the childcare costs, and how off the back of just many friends who have children, a number of them actually aren't going back to work and aren't in work because they can't afford. I mean, they're coming out as a loss, which actually is affecting their mental health. And I think it's something that we've really got to think about in terms of not just making sure that the load is equal between males and females when it comes to childcare, but also that it's actually possible, because I think there's a lot of females out there that don't want to stop their careers and don't want to have to stay at home and feel confined and all the rest of it. You know, we've as a nation, we've given these people great oomph to say, yes, come on, you can have a career, you can have whatever you want, and then retracted it quite quickly as soon as children happen, because there isn't the ability to do it well. So I have a bit of a passion about that from a sort of mental health welfare, really, for my friends who would be quite keen to go back to work.
I totally agree. I mean, rather than trying to entice the oldies back, why not try and keep the young people, in work? It's as simple as that, really.
Well, plus also yeah, and they've already got it's already there. It's you only go off to have a child for a year maximum. So from that point of view, it's not like everything they've learned has fallen. So they're already trained. You don't have to reteach or retrain. They're there, ready to go.
No, I totally agree. Thanks for that, Lindsay. Right, let's go over to you, David. What have you picked out for us today, please, mate?
Good morning, everyone. I've got two main stories, and one is probably slightly contentious about the NHS and the fact that the portrayal in the newspapers, I've got the Guardian here, is talking about waiting times and 3 in 10 staff thinking of quitting at the moment, which I think most of us can probably understand why. And they're pointing out the fact that you've got junior doctors talking about striking next week, what an effect that will have on patients, etc. And the government appear to be doing very little about it. And I think they kind of drew their line in the sand. I think, was it last year when they were asking for, I think it was only like 2% pay rise at the beginning of last year, and they were offered 1%. And I think, unfortunately, the government kind of drew their line in the sand then to say, look, this is what we really think, despite us spending the last 2 years standing outside our front doors clapping. And it then sort of transpires that the way that they're trying to get around that is to almost portray the people going on strike, who are basically, because of the cost of living crisis, as the bad guys and causing delays and things like that. Whereas the reality is, I think most of us would agree, this country would look very, very different without what the NHS did during COVID. And I don't think any of us would have a problem with, even if we paid a little bit extra, to make sure they had the pay rise that we all think that they really deserve. And that, there's another different part of the paper. It points out that there's like £100 million windfall tax that Hunt doesn't really know what to do with. Well, I've got a really good idea for him. And it's basically what we've just said. And, off the back of that, there's another report in the Times going on with the NHS that half of cancer patients receive no treatment for the first 2 months, which is, a terrible statistic. In those situations, you want to go straight in and get some sort of treatment.
And I think
Which-
it's a bit of a lottery as well, isn't it? Where you live. I think that's the saddest thing, more than anything else. You know, here in Gloucestershire, we're very fortunate. The cardiology unit is really, really well known, well respected for the area. You know, Bristol has its sort of areas as well. I know in Suffolk and Norfolk, where my parents were treated, they were really good with their cancer care. You know, so I think it's really is a lottery in some cases. No,
It is.
thanks
There
ever
was a
so much.
report that came out yesterday with our local NHS. Basically, you know, they're up there at the very top in the country. So we are very lucky in this county.
I couldn't agree with you more, especially as I've been saved twice by the NHS Gloucester.
Yeah.
COVID and a heart attack. So you can't get bigger than those in some ways. Right. Thanks ever so much for that, David. Right. Hey, Dan, thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks. Welcome to the show for the first time. Great to see you. So what have you picked up for us, please?
Basically, in the Times this morning, there's Bordeaux's pub wrap, basically, which is builders have been given just 12 months to rebuild a Grade 2 listed pub after bulldozing it without permission. They have been told to restore it brick by brick, scouring the rubble for the original features of the 18th century coaching in, which is crazy, really. So, yeah.
Well, as a builder, does this happen? I can't imagine it happens very easily, surely.
I think it's down to a lot of like education. People don't really know the sort of laws around listed buildings and what you're allowed to do. And we see this time and time again with clients and also subcontractors and stuff where they don't understand exactly what you can't do and what you can do. So, for example, this there is going to cost them £70,000 in fines, plus they're going to have to rebuild it. But it's the history that you lose as well, because this building will never be built how it was built with the methods and the traditional skills, which is a shame. And it's the heritage and history of this, really. So, but yeah, so we come across it where people think the listing is the staircase or the front door. It's not. It's everything around it and the curtilage of the grounds and stuff. So yeah, it's just a crazy one, really. And then the other story was from the Times Moving Stories, how I learned to fight back against landlords. And again, this is something we see time and time again with landlords compliance and damping properties and stuff. But basically it says here, we lived and battled with black mold while being told the laundry was to blame rather than a lack of ventilation, a leaking roof, a floor unsupported by joists, and a burst sewer pipe in our garden. Despite all of this, nothing felt like more of a joke than when we were told that there would be deductions from our deposits. So we see this time and time again where landlords and agents are basically, tenants are reporting issues, nothing gets done with it, but then the tenants are getting the blame for the issues at the properties. So not opening windows and having damp laundry inside a property. But if you live in a basement flat with no garden, what are you going to do with your washing? And they say to open windows, but install fans and doors, for example. It says in here about the fire doors not shutting properly. I think landlords and then letting agents basically need to do a lot more around tenants' sort of compliance and safety, really.
And this is normally the not being funny, Dan. This is normally the poorer people in society, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah, the least able to help themselves in some cases, and the landlord's really just taking advantage of them.
Yeah, and it's as well. We see it a lot where tenants don't report the problems, and they obviously become a lot worse. But it's unfair for tenants to be deducted money for a little chip in a wall or a little mark on a piece of furniture when they've probably been living in that property for a year or two with mold and damp and other issues that they come across. But there needs to be like an MOT like you have for cars with rental properties now, because it's unfair to tenants. And I see it from all sides because I'm a landlord, a tenant and a contractor. So we're able to sort of, basically.
Didn't they get fined for having a fox as well?
Yeah. So it says in here, where is it? Basically, they got fined. Their landlord fined them because they found a dead fox in the garden. Basically, yeah.
And they had to take the fox away.
Fox away, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great stories. Thanks ever so much for that, Dan. Okay, let's go back over to you, Will, and obviously Randall and Payne and what you guys are doing at the moment. The budget is coming down the tracks, but there's a lot of business still needing business advice, isn't there? So what are you seeing in the marketplace at the moment?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I always get busy around January, February time, because that's when, New Year's resolutions kick in, right? And it applies to the business as well as individuals personally. and this year's been a bit even more demand, I think. And I think I've put it down to a combination of, I don't think there's a lack of confidence. We talk about the economy and recession. I don't think that's the case for most business owners. As I said earlier, I think there's plenty of confidence around, but I do think there's some uncertainty that follows with that, because there's just a lot of moving parts at the moment. Is there going to be recession? What's the outcome of Brexit? Changes of prime minister, budget coming up? All these things are going on, and people are trying to see the way through it. So lots of them are reaching out to us with demand for business mentoring, and our business success programs is off the scale at the moment, which is fantastic. Really enjoying delivering on that side. We're also seeing, related to that a lot of work around our management services team. So we're taking on lots of clients in that area. So that's about producing the numbers and the management accounts and everything to actually get some really good, solid, reliable data that helps you to make decisions. And I think, again, it's related to the uncertainty. If there's lots of uncertainty out there, you need to be certain about it as much as you can. So actually understanding what the business is doing day to day and what the numbers look like is really important. So, there's the accountancy part for you. But I'm really enjoying it at the moment. I said some fantastic work coming in, and seeing some of the results that we're able to get with clients through our mentoring and business success programs is amazing. Fantastic.
Are you still seeing a lot of people come to you, after COVID? There were a lot of companies were thinking, right, that's it, I've had enough, I want to retire. How do I get out? What's the plan?
Yeah, we're certainly doing exits. So my colleague Ollie's on the corporate finance side. He's plenty busy enough too with business sales. But I think it's a slightly different interpretation for me post COVID. People retired at 55 and all that stuff was going on. But I think again it's people having a proper rethink about their own lives in the future and where the business fits in and what they need to do with the business. So where in the past they might have said, "Oh, I'm going to do it differently this year. I need to make the business perform better." This year, post-COVID, they really saying, "Right, I really am going to do it, and I need to get some help." So I think that's what's changing. I think people are thinking about their futures. If they want to retire in 5 years' time, they just need to get the business working better. So I think it's rather than, "Oh, I need to get out of this," it's okay, let's make it work so I can get out of it, kind of thing. So yeah, definitely seeing some of that. Yeah.
And what's your starting point? So if I was coming to you for the first time, very, very briefly, what do you do? Do you do an audit to start off with? Is there a fee involved? Just for a consultation? How does it start?
I typically sit down with a client for a couple of hours because actually talk about what success means to them, what are they trying to achieve. I think that's always the start point for me. And I want to work out what their personal goals are, what the goals are for the business, and then following on from that, we can help them work out how to do it. But for me, I need to understand what their goals are, and then I need to see whether it's something that I think I can help them to deliver. So that's always the start. I'm happy to sit down with anybody for a couple of hours and just talk about the business and what they're trying to do. The fees kick in a bit later. But we do the peer workshops, get groups of businesses together. We had that this week, got some fantastic feedback from the people that were there, one-to-one mentoring, and some online coaching and learning as well. So it's just a combination of all those things, bring it together, and it just makes such a powerful difference to the people's lives and their businesses, to be honest.
No, it sounds fantastic. I know you've invited me a number of times. I will do it coming up very shortly. Now that I've got some more people.
I might not have any spaces left now, Mark. I'll put you on the waiting list.
Thanks very much for that, Will. Great stuff. Hey, Lindsey, let's go back over to you because obviously you work in the hospitality, running a hotel. I mean, you got the cost of living crisis, you got the cost of energy. What's it been like for you over the last couple of months, and how do you see the future?
Well, actually, I was just listening to Will thinking, actually, maybe it would be good to have a chat. I think it's a stressful time for everyone in hospitality at the moment. I don't think anyone can deny we are in probably the worst point, in as much as post-COVID people had money and excitement, we just couldn't be open, whereas now we're open, we can't afford to really put our prices up to where they should be, and people can't afford to come and stay with us. So we've got a really difficult scenario to try and work through. Personally, for me at the hotel, I've had a shocking winter because that lovely snowfall that we had back in December pushed my lovely older building to the limit, and I ended up with snow coming in through the roof. My steps totally fell apart up to the hotel, so I spent nearly £30,000 on trying to make her safe and secure and watertight over the winter, which was something I really wasn't thinking of heading into winter. October, November, December were basically running at a loss, because in order to have the heating on, it just wiped out any profit in any way, shape or form. And I'm not alone. The beauty of having Turf Cheltenham is the fact that you obviously have a network of independent hospitality businesses who are all going, but it makes you feel like you're not alone, and that actually helps the mental side of things. You can stay positive in some way because you don't feel like you're doing something wrong. It's just where we are at the moment as an industry. However, we are teetering on. Oh, go on.
No, I was going to ask you about Turf and obviously the restaurant trade there and everybody else within the organisation that you chair. How are they doing? Are people? It seems the footfall is back. Are the people spending? Even though they've had to raise the cost because of product has gone up?
I think that's the problem. The footfall's there, and interestingly enough, a couple of our businesses have said actually they've had a busier January than they've ever had before being open, and so you see the positivity. But at the same time, spend is decreasing because people are potentially sharing something, or they're just having drinks and a starter rather than doing a whole 3-course. Very similar to how it was when we had the banking crisis years ago. All of a sudden, lunches went because people were sort of like, well, we can't really take people out for lunch, or so we keep going as an industry. We just have to adjust and get used to what the new norm is for people coming out at the moment. So yes, people are there. And again, we've got a race week coming up next week. I'm full. Everyone I speak to says, no, the business is there. We're full. We're nearly at capacity. But we obviously, the proof is in the pudding, and I don't know whether the spend next week will be up or down in businesses in Cheltenham, because people aren't, they're coming, but maybe they just don't have that extra bit of cash to splash.
It depends, isn't it, really, who comes over? And the big Irish crowd come in, they tend to splash the cash, as we all know. How much is the race week worth to you, Lindsey, if you don't mind me asking?
It's what I earn in March in a week will take me April to achieve, if that makes sense, if that gives you an idea. So March and April look pretty good on forecast, but because of 1 week as March as opposed to a month in April. It also really depends on where Easter falls as well. But yes, interestingly enough, business on the books for this year ahead is down on last year, but because last year I had an absolute influx of all the carryovers of people wanting to do holidays from COVID, whereas this year it's back to, oh right, hang on a minute, how do I get people to stay? So yeah, turning the brain on again and going, oh yes, that's right, we have to do that thing called advertising and marketing and all those other things, which is great. No complaints, but definitely it's a tricky time to be trying to balance all the different parts.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that really honest insight there, Lindsey. Okay, let's go over to you, Dave. I mean, you're having a bit of a bumper time, aren't you? Signage and all the new shops open on Montpellier and all this sort of stuff. What's sort of coming new in the sort of signage thing at the moment? Signage industry, shall we say? Is there anything in particular?
Well, you know what we're like. We try and look at every job and come up with new ideas and innovative ways to create new signage and combine things as well together to create something that's slightly different to what everybody expects from their signage, and make it work as hard as it can. But absolutely, we're noticing lots of new shops opening up everywhere. And what I have found, just before Christmas, all the media were talking about people cutting back or businesses cutting back. And one of the first things that generally always goes is advertising. But when you kind of look back at history, the companies that have done really well, the ones that haven't actually cut back, they've invested more because they've noticed that their competitors are cutting back. So they get more bang for their buck, in effect, by investing at that time. And I think a lot of people have kind of tapped into that this time round, which is why, we've been doubling our turnover year on year for the last couple of years. We're on target again to do that again this year. And I think since Christmas, I came back in the new year thinking, well, we'll just take it steady. We'll see how the land lies. But actually, people have been really investing in their advertising, which is great for business and it's great for the county. But we've noticed, lots of new shops opening, which is fantastic. Lots of things going into Cheltenham as well, which is great. And there's a story of yours, Mark, that I'm going to bring up later as well, that kind of relates to that too. So yeah, generally it's been really good. I mean, our industry has been doing very, very well. We've been very lucky in it. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Now's the time. Now's the time to advertise if you can afford it. Now's the time to dip your hand in your pocket, because you will get a lot more for your bang for your buck. And as you know, thanks ever so much. You do advertise a lot with us as well, and you do use us. So thanks ever so much for that. And vice versa, I buy all my banners from you, and you know, it's a you know, and you always do a great job as well. So thanks for that, Dave. Let's go over to Dan. Dan, it was great. So I had a cup of coffee with you the other day, and you filled us in about your business. So I do know a little bit about you. Could you tell the others, please, about Elijah Willow? Where's the name come from, first of all?
So the Elijah Willow is my two children. Elijah's my little boy who's 4, and Willow's my little girl who's 6.
And why did you come up with the name? I mean, obviously, were you hunting around for a name and suddenly thought, well, I'll just use my kids?
Exactly, yeah. We were sat in the van one day and we were reeling off names, me and my friend, and he was going Willow Elijah and Elijah Willow, and then we both agreed that was the one, and then we've used that for every company we've got, basically.
So how many companies have you got? Because it's not just a construction company. You call it Elijah Willow Group, but there are like 8 or 9 different sections.
Yeah, got maintenance, developments, properties, bespoke, and construction. So we basically build, maintain, manage. It's everything construction and property related, basically. And then off the back of that, we started Cathedral Living and Coffees and Dreams as well.
So you I know that you're doing a lot of properties up in the centre of Gloucester at the moment, aren't you? Above shops and things. I know it's something that you're quite passionate about. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so basically we're trying to take all the whatever empty, disused properties that we can, mainly great listed buildings, traditional sort of buildings that have been sat there vacant for a long time, and coming up with new ways to sort of bring them back to life. So we've bought one in Westgate Street, number 80, and we've put in planning permission to turn that into a HMO upstairs. It's more suited the way that the layout is for a HMO. And then on the ground floor, we're going to then make an affordable retail unit, which we're actually going to take on ourselves and have that as our office. So we're trying to come up with ways to fulfill the ground floor spaces, so the high street doesn't look as empty as what it is. And I think by bringing people back into the city centre, you can have more people there spending, living there. So it should sort of hopefully start thriving again. And what the Cathedral Quarter do in Westgate and Foregate to Gloucester is really good. They've got some big plans, so it's quite exciting times really going forward. But we've just put planning permission in at 55 Northgate Street for our clients to put another story on top of the building there. That's going to be 6 3-bedroom flats, and then coming up with 2 ideas for the ground floor retail spaces for there. So, and we're looking at a couple more this week. So it's just trying to help people sort of give them ideas, because not everyone thinks of what they can do with the spaces. But for me, for example, with 80 Westgate Street, we can bring in 45 to 50,000 pound a year income from the upper floor space. With the ground floor space, it doesn't matter if we don't get anything, because the income it works on the upstairs. So, and then we're trying to sort of, it would be really good if we could get the council or other people on board to help with this, because we want to try and teach people how to operate a business, how to be self-employed. And I feel like the town centre should almost be like a live training environment to make sure we've got these skills. And by us focusing on the older style buildings, we're able to then keep the skills alive. We send lots of apprentices to college. They do a brilliant job, but they're shown the new build way of building, where if we let them loose in a grade 1 listed building, they may go and remove a doorway or or bulldoze the pub in Lancashire, but because it's education around it. So for us, like the Fleece, for example, in Gloucester, throw 100 apprentices in there with local businesses that know their craft, and train them and sort of give them a qualification in it. But not only that, show them how to do your accounts and run like everything that comes with being self-employed. So that we're not taught that, and I feel that's quite important.
No, I'll tell you, Dan, I can see how passionate you are about it as well. And I think it's well worth having a chat to council about it. They are very open-minded about the
Hi, council.
There we go. Right, we've run out of time for this sort of section, actually. So just quickly like to go over to see what you guys have picked out for Punchline this week. I'm going to start with Lindsey first, actually. So Lindsey, what have you picked out from Punchline? Bearing in mind we don't have very much time left, unfortunately.
So I was just going to champion your sort of selection of videos for International Women's Day. I led a conference on, well, was part of a conference that we led on Wednesday at the Pump Rooms, and it was great. I think these things have changed over the years. I think instead of it being like, oh, we need to celebrate women, I think it's more about how do we support each other, how do we develop each other, what can we do? And Cicely was there actually from Siblings, a fellow TERF member, so it was lovely to see her, and obviously have a gin. But no, I think it's the way forward if we can keep supporting each other, men, women, whatever. I mean, that's literally just the way forward. And what Daniel's saying is spot on in terms of youngsters and just in every direction. So yes, so I guess a bit of a thank you for just keeping the word moving around. You know, it's keep talking about things.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Dave, what have you picked out from this week's punchline, please?
We're just kind of following on from what I was saying before. There's a great story about the development of Regent Arcade roof space, which is a fantastic idea. They got planning permission approved in 2018, where they're going to build the plan is to build a 2-story series of restaurants, etc., on top of Regent Arcade to help develop that area, which is again a great draw into Cheltenham, especially with Race Week coming up next week. It's another reason to come into Cheltenham. Great restaurants all in Cheltenham, lots of great shopping around there as well. So it's a really, really good idea, and it's very well thought through by the guys over at Regent Arcade, I think.
I totally agree. It's a really great idea. Dan, I'm going to go over to you, and I'm going to finish with Will, as Will started today. So we start and finish with Will. Dan, what have you picked out from this week's punchline, please?
So I think I don't know if it's this week actually, but the We Dig It, which was the start of the work on the world's first wooden stadium, which Dale Vince is building over in Stonehouse. I think it's going to be unbelievable what they're doing over there. That's going to be good for the local economy as well. So that's it basically.
I totally agree. It is a fantastic idea.
It looks amazing.
It does look amazing. Right, thanks ever so much for that. Will, what have you picked out then for us, please? We've finished with you today.
Well, as a owner of a new battery electric vehicle, which is we all know is a massively tax efficient thing to be doing, there was a story about cars are made where batteries are made. So we need to make car batteries, otherwise we won't have a car industry in the UK anymore. I thought it was a really interesting story. Obviously, our friends down at Renishaw are involved in that as well. But yeah, really interesting. I am now an EV nerd. I know all about smart charging. So if anybody does get an electric vehicle, then give me a call, and I'll save you hours and hours and hours of research on the internet about how you do it.
It's funny. I can imagine you actually being an EV nerd.
Here's the thing. So it's a. I don't know. I should say this live on air, but I'm sat at the electric public charging point. Another car draws up. It's a proper little EV club. You get the little nod, like a cycle. You get a little nod and a wave. Anyway, mum and daughter gets out, and when not doesn't take very long before we're engaged in conversation. I think if I'd have been a bit younger and had an EV, this is where I'd have gone.
This is where you can find people to date.
This is the new dating, Mark. Honestly,
speed dating. Great idea, Will. Thanks ever so much. Well, that's all we got time for today, guys. Thanks ever so much, my fantastic panel. Big thank you also to Hazelwood's, our sponsors, business advisors and accountants. And next week, it is actually the budget. So keep an eye very, very closely what's happening there. Anyway, if you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next week. And don't forget, it's all in the punchline. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.